So this part of the history played out kind of like the recorded history did, where Arthur became aware of Lancelot and Guinevere and their improprieties, and Lancelot was chased away from the kingdom, and Guinevere was to be burned at the stake, but Lancelot rescued her. And then Lancelot and Arthur went to war, and then everything was kind of settled down. And then Mordred went to war with Arthur, and then pretty much everyone was killed. I mean, it was just a bloodbath, and everyone was killed. So the boss was sent away. They had poisoned his child, and so because his child was poisoned, he went away. They lied to Clarence about where the boss was. And, in the previous chapter, the boss was stranded, and we realized that he was stranded. He made his own way back. So things went from bad to worse. And the church went and they banned the electric lights. They banned all sorts of other things. And Clarence is giving a big, long setup for how he has things set. So Merlin's cave, big electrical plant. And he built fences around it. And these are electric fences, which were kind of new in Mark Twain's time. They existed in principle, but they weren't really a thing. You didn't have large amounts of electric fences. You had barbed wire fences, which were common, but electric fences were kind of a new thing, and he gets a little bit of the physics wrong. But that's okay. Anyway, so it has these rings of electric fences set up. So if they charge one electric fence, a bunch of guys get electrocuted. They charge the next one, another bunch of guys, and another bunch of guys, until they have 12 layers of these things. So that's a good defense. Then he has essentially landmines. And landmines, once again, something kind of new in the period this is. And Gatling guns. Gatling guns were first set up during the Civil War, Crimean War, which took place around the same period of time, and they were just this monstrosity that totally redid warfare. World War One was all artillery and Gatling guns and machine guns and things like that, where you use the Gatling guns to keep people in place, because you don't charge a Gatling gun because you get shot down. So you use the Gatling guns to keep people in place, and you use your artillery to blow them up. And you dig trenches to keep them from doing that to you. So anyway, the Gatling guns, the artillery, the landmines, and it's all about controlling area. And the Civil War, U.S. Civil War, actually started a bunch of the things that World War I became famous for. They had artillery spotting aircraft in the Civil War, except it was balloons and not airplanes. And so what it was he had a guy go up in a balloon, and he would write notes and say, okay, aim the guns this way, and they aim the guns that way. And so he could see where the bullets were landing. He could see people sneaking around. So the Civil War was really kind of like a beta test for World War I. And all of this stuff is straight out of the Civil War, World War I playbook. Planes and such were a little bit too new, and Mark Twain probably didn't understand the advantages of balloons in warfare at this point. But, so here you have Clarence, who's setting all of this stuff up, and the boss is like, okay, so do I wait for them to come to me, or do I force them to come to me? And the reason why he forces them to come to him is because this is kind of, this is a siege. And sieges are all about waiting for the other side to either get bored or starve or die of thirst. So yes, he has this impregnable fortress. Guess what? The church has the rest of the country. They could just sit there and go, okay, fine. Enjoy your fortress. And boss knows this. The boss knows that in the long run, he's not going to survive. They're going to undo everything he did. So he's like, okay, I got to convince them to come to me. And so here he is. He's making a lot of noise, waving a big red banner. Come and get it. And so he's trying to convince the church to go at him. Now, the beginning thing, how the whole mess started, was the boss introduced a stock market. And so there were a bunch of people who did something called selling short, which is where you sell something that you don't have. And you say, okay, I will sell you this stock, and, I'll deliver it to you later. You can come pick it up later. And so what happens is sometimes there's more of the stock out there than what it's worth. So Lancelot figured out that this was going on, and he bought up all he could, and they kept buying more. So what happened was these speculators were selling stock they didn't have to just random people, and the random people were selling it to Lancelot. And so when Lancelot went to collect the promises of the stock, it's like, you don't have it. And this is what is referred to as a short squeeze. Now, this type of thing has happened occasionally. Well, this sort of thing happens occasionally, and people have gone really, really broke. Companies have fallen. All sorts of things have happened. The most recent instance of this was with a company called Gamestop. Now, Gamestop 20 years ago was huge because there wasn't the internet and people went to stores to buy games rather than just download them onto their tablets or their iPhones or their laptops or whatever. They would go to the store and they would hand cash across the cash register, and the person at the cash register would hand across a disc with a game on it or a cartridge with a game on it, and they'd take it home and they would play the game. And so GameStop was in the business of doing this. And recently they've fallen on hard times because everyone just goes to the internet and downloads a game, and everything is downloaded. You don't need the physical copies. And because you don't need the physical copies, you don't need a store to sell them in because you can just sell them online and download it all. So GameStop was kind of in a bad situation. And there were some sort of smart people who realized that GameStop is not going to be a going concern for much longer. So they were like, okay, we'll sell. And then, they sell the thing that they don't have, and they promise that they'll get it back. Well, there were some people who noticed this. And they were like, there's far more GameStop stock out there than there should be. And it's like, okay, there should be 100 million shares. Or there should be 50 million shares, let's say. There should be 50 million shares, and they saw 100 million, 200 million. And they were like, hey, what if we start buying this? And so they bought it. And they bought more, and they bought more, and the price started going up. Now, big part of the problem was that the people who sold the shares that they didn't have borrowed money to do this. And, they did some financial transactions where they used stuff as collateral. And all of a sudden, they were losing insane amounts of money because they had no way to cover their promise to deliver the stock. And this is the same thing that happened with Lancelot, where Lancelot was the guy who realized, hey, wait a minute, there's more of this than there should be. I'm going to buy it all. So Lancelot bought it all. And then he ended up making a deal with the people to let them off the hook for the stock in exchange for something else, some other company. So he ended up taking over all of that. And he just made himself rich. He was already rich, but he made himself really, really rich. And the boss is like, well, yeah, they deserve to be skinned. They did something stupid. And so, the boss was like, yeah, they deserve to be skinned. Well, these people then decided to tell King Arthur about Lancelot. And during the whole mess, they started to tell King Arthur about Lancelot, and then King Arthur heard, and they fought, and more people died, and then more people died, and more people died, and the whole war started. So that's what happened. Now, it was an interesting setup that the boss had dynamite placed under all his factories. Because if you were to take a look at 1,300 years of time between when Arthur was and modern times, you would think that factories that had been around would be findable. But, here's the boss explaining that they had dynamite set up underneath them. Though, admittedly, that's kind of pointless, because the church has been all anti-tech. And they're like, no electric lights, none of this stuff. So the boss is essentially planning to blow up stuff that's only really useful to him. So that's kind of not entirely smart.